Thanks for joining us. This is the Marquette Township Board. We are having a work session. Today's Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Just 2:01 p.m. If you'll do roll call, please, Randy.
All right, trustee Winslow and Everson are excused and absent. Trustee Kidda. Here. Trustee Leighton. Here. Treasurer Rickower. Here. Clerk Rattari is here and Supervisor Durant.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Kangas, our attorney Rogers Apples here, our Superintendent of Public Works Lenny Lodinas is here, and our Finance Director Kim Clark is here.
Okay. Any public comment before we get started?
And just so everyone knows, this is a work session, so there's no motions, it's just informational discussion here.
Okay. Who wants to start? John?
You get to pick the chicken or the egg. Who do you want to hear from first? The person requesting the use of this tool or the person that represents the organization that provides the tool to developers?
Probably Mitch, so we can hear the intent.
Okay,
Would be
all right,
good.
sure.
Start with that.
Yeah, so I put together a couple slides, try to be pretty high level, just trying to, we're looking at our project overall. We're getting through our final underwriting with our different lenders and just looking at the hoops that come with developing in the area. And there's just different tools out there to utilize. And this is one of the tools that are in our toolbox. It's very advantageous for us. Just from the structure of it, it's also very advantageous for this project for ensuring speed. So a lot of the lenders up here, not all of them, but like for an example, we were working with a lender over in Munising, People's State Bank. Their legal lending limit is $3 million. This project is an $8 million project. So it's not that they can't do that, but you get a lot more lending partners involved in this area versus other areas. So every tool that we can use in that toolbox helps us build faster because it allows us to de-risk the project by basically using these other tools and gets us out of the pre-sale requirement. When we're moving this fast, it's difficult to ensure you have pre-sales, especially on these attainable units, because let's look at the timeline we have. We're hoping to have foundations started April-May timeframe. We're finalizing floor plans right now. We would release them to market by pretty much February. So you'll be February, March, and April to try to collect pre-sales on these units by the time you're breaking ground. That's not a lot of time, especially in this area. I will vouch on Maple Ridge. It's pretty quiet this time of year. Most people are hunkered down. We're all enjoying the winter. We're usually not thinking like, hey, let's go move our entire house in 8 feet of snow, especially with the winter we've had this year. So this is just another tool in our toolbox that we found. And we think it would be a great option for us to work together on. This tool specifically requires a township or a municipal interaction in order for this tool to be executed. It can't be executed by a developer alone. And then InvestUP has other products, but when we look at how those InvestUP funds are currently underwritten, it's not an equity issue that we have on our project or in order to underwrite it, it's the ability to use the capital. So while they can deposit funds to our account to make our capital look better, we can't really use it. So it's not really beneficial to underwriting the project. It's kind of unique. It doesn't make sense, but it's just kind of the facts of how that works. So essentially, that's why we're coming to the board saying, hey, there's a tool out there we can use to make sure that this project goes quickly. We have less hoops. Let's see if it's an option we want to work together on. So that's kind of where this overall ask came from. So the benefits of using this tool is a quicker timeline, which basically increases the economic activity in the area. So those 24 units get built 100% started in that April-May timeframe. Obviously, there's going to be a schedule associated with that, but our goal with not only this tool, but any tool that we use is to have every home framed of those 24 units by November. We have capacity for that. We're capable of it. but really it just guarantees that funding in this area. So it's continuous construction. We aren't worried about, oh, we need to make a pre-sale to keep moving. We've got to pause this, pause that, which really can delay things. We have a perfect example of this in Maple Ridge. We had an electrician that was delayed by a week. It delayed our project 5 weeks. And I'm sure anyone up here knows how construction works. That's very normal. So by having a firm schedule up front, again, helps us make sure that we move that forward, eliminating hopefully any amount of pre-sales needed. We also front load all of the infrastructure. So rather than doing phase 1 or phase 2 infrastructure, this pretty much guarantees, hey, we're going to show up and do all the infrastructure at once, sewer and water. There's no reason to split it up. Also, I know this is a short project in general that we're planning, but either way, reduce public impact, put in infrastructure once, not twice. So not after we have families moved in on one side of the street that we're trying to continue down the rest of the street, building our way in. So safety of the community, of really the neighbors that are there more than anything else. Our proposal with how this is structured is no impact to the general fund. Obviously, you guys got to look at how that actually looks on the back end, and Roger, making sure that that makes sense. That's our interpretation of how we could use these funds to have no impact to the general fund. So again, it's the accelerated timeline and then the capture of the state funding with what Build UP has. The risk and trade-offs that we see, essentially you gain hundreds of thousands of infrastructure without spending your own capital by using the bonds. Obviously, the developers were committed to spending that money either way. What we're trying to stack with collateral on top of this is basically surplus. So our collateral that we're proposing is in the event of non-performance, you have all the land, you have the infrastructure of that, you also have the TIF revenue, and then the capture of the MISHDA funding as well. Not that you are in the business to develop, but from an equity side, you're sitting pretty upside on this with how we would kind of structure this. So again, this gives no liability to that general fund. Essentially, this project itself pays for itself, and that's what's kind of always been out there with that TIF approval that we did. This really does help us utilize this fund. It helps back that fund as well. It gives you guys also the escrow control, whether you want that or not, but essentially it allows you to verify, hey, infrastructure was installed and it was installed correctly. We will now make sure the funds are dispersed. That's really the only control that we're looking for from this partnership, is kind of that double verification, which you're going to do anyway in a typical project like this, but it just gives that extra thing. And then again, it's the guaranteed revenue from our trades that are on site and mobilized through this. So essentially our ask is to be able to participate with you guys in the Invest UP residential infrastructure program. By doing this, you would issue a bond, to my understanding, and Invest UP purchases that bond. And that's where the cash or collateral comes from. Then we basically build, it's not really we do our portion and do the roads. It's the utilities on this is just done up front. Basically, the role here is a pass-through financing of this tool. That's really what the township involvement comes in, because they can't use, the way that Invest UP is set up, they can't use this tool directly to developers. They need to have a township on board for that. And then again, verified spending. So making sure that everything's spent is going to the right places through that bond. So this total needs to be verified. This is not really a conversation to this full extent for this meeting, because I think there's some things that we need to work with Overstar on and all this, but this is our site cost today. This is not including land, any of that. There's probably portions of this that need to be portioned out because we have mobilization. Well, mobilization, that's that first line item that says 11. There's supposed to be mobilization there, but it's for some reason the 75,000. So there's, site clearing and stuff like that. One can argue that site clearing is part of road installation, things like that. So I don't think all of this is going to be 100% applicable. And so it's something that we would need to look through line item by line item. But essentially, this is the cost to develop that site today. So what we're looking to do is to bond this portion of the project that would be applicable to just the sewer and water infrastructure, which is what this tool is able to cover. And then any costs associated with that, which is close to $1 million. So that's the ask. That's where we're at. Any questions on all this? I know it's a lot of information really fast. I tried to lay it out kind of concisely.
So when you had mentioned about the double checking the water and sewer, do we have guys in our township that do that? Danny does that. Oh, beautiful. And I know that it's very helpful to make sure the excavator puts a cradle on it.
Yes. And they do all their testing, and they've got pressure tests and things as well.
We have some pretty experienced guys out there in the field that document it. We still rely on record drawings from the contractor / developer, but we confirm with our own eyes. And we're always there witnessing the testing too.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't change anything whether we're fully private or we use this. I think that happens anyway as part of the developer's agreement. It's just you kind of have a horse to the payment check at this point that, hey, it didn't pass the test. Me as a private developer can still pay the contractor. You guys have the ability to say, no, it didn't pass the test. We're not going to do that. Obviously, it's not my best interest to pay a contractor, but that's kind of that safety level risk that's added by using the bond.
Everything still goes through the Eagle permits 399 and Part 41, regardless who does it. So
Any other questions for Mitch?
Linda does, she's gonna unmute
Okay.
herself here.
Oh, I don't have any questions right now. I was just waving at Dave. Sorry.
All right. He's not here.
Okay,
Yes.
Roger, go
I
ahead.
guess I do. Maybe I'm a little bit out of order.
No.
Or meeting protocol,
Not at all.
but normally in a project like this, the contractor constructs the water, the sewer, and any other utilities, and then the township looks at it and says, we either accept it, or you've got to add this valve, or redo this little section, or use a different grinder pump, or whatever.
Yep.
So we don't own it until it's done. Is that what you're envisioning here also?
Yes, that is correct. It's not because the check's really not written until it's done.
But at the end of the day, you're looking to sign the system over to Marquette Township, assuming it's acceptable to them.
That is
So it'll
correct.
be part of the public water and sewer system, as opposed to, I'll give an example, Lost Creek over here across from the old township hall has a private system.
Yep.
Or at least, well, we won't go there. But you're envisioning it'll connect to the public system eventually upon completion.
That is correct. Yep.
What about the road it's sitting in? Is that gonna be a public road?
The road is
dedicated to the road
private.
Commission or
No,
not?
the road is private with how the PUD has currently been approved.
Okay,
So the intent would be that this does not cover any of the road costs at all as part of this bonding.
that was my understanding, is that it was gonna be a private road and that it probably isn't even going to meet criteria for
Correct.
acceptance by the Marquette County Road Commission, but I just wanted to make sure I'm on the same
Yep.
page here. Okay,
Absolutely.
that was it.
Yeah, I think the challenge to put a public road on this site is if you went with the full county right of way width, you wouldn't have any land left to build homes on.
Yes,
That's
the
just
density.
the mathematical reality of it. So putting a private road in a PUD development like this does make sense, similar to Heritage Silos just up the road from there on Grove Street.
Okay, it was always my understanding that especially some of the other projects we've had recently, that we cannot do this as a township, where cities can partner on infrastructure. Townships are not allowed to. So I don't know if that's a pertinent question now or wait and hear the rest of the story or.
I mean, I think it is, because I don't know, I guess that would be part of your bylaws that would require that, and I don't know if Roger, if you know anything that would restrict the township from bonding. This is a private bond, not a public bond too, so there's possibly that. It would, I might not be understanding it properly, but my understanding is, imagine some level of private funds that a private person comes to you and says, I want to bond one of your projects. That's kind of what this fund is utilized for, even though it has some state funding behind it. Steve can probably speak more to that, but Roger would be able to tell us if bonding
I
is
can, that's not correct.
Okay.
This would be a public bond, the borrower would be the township.
Okay.
So basically, on the one hand, some of you may have been around, maybe not, back when we built the Commerce and Venture Drive. I guess I'm dating myself here. That was different because the township owned the land, including the streets. So funding from that, public funding, could be used to develop the project. And that was essentially through the Downtown Development Association, the DDA, and we had a TIF then also. But public land, public funds, so if there is, regardless of whether what's being asked is the spending of public funds. And that's completely permissible on property that the township owns and controls. I'm struggling, and I'm keeping a completely open mind because I didn't know the details of this in advance. But generally speaking, the township is prohibited from spending public funds on things it doesn't own. So back up. A year ago, when the township owned this 5-acre parcel, could you have spent funds regardless of, and it's equally public funds, regardless of whether it's bond revenue or whether it's coming from the general fund or whether it's a surplus in the water and sewer fund, it's still public money. And it could have been potentially used, not suggesting you would have ever done this, but you could have put in a water and a sewer line on property that you owned, potentially, and then you would act as the developer and sell lots, just like you did for the whole Commerce and Venture Drive scenario. Here, it's a private development, so you would essentially be prohibited, except in extremely limited circumstances, from using public funds to improve private property.
That's the way I understood it.
Now, granted, that's why I was asking the question, it's not always going to be private property because the water and sewer mains will eventually belong to the township. So they will be publicly owned at some point, but the money is going to have to get spent before those water and sewer mains and associated hardware and utilities become owned by the township. And in fact, that's one of the leverages that the township maintains is if it's, I realize we've got reputable contractors here lined up and so forth, but if it's going to be built by Ed's Plumbing, who's never installed a sewer line before, you've got some leverage to say that is not satisfactory. And this is in addition to the DQ and so forth. But you have some leverage to say we're not going to accept that. So we don't own that plumbing at this point, and you have a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. I'm not saying there isn't a way it can't be accomplished, but you generally are prohibited from spending public dollars on private projects.
And I think to kind of couple with that is we're not proposing contractors are paid from the bond until it's completed to be accepted. So it kind of is public and then the funds are released.
Okay, I was kind of waiting to hear that part. But how long are you envisioning it'll take the contractors to complete that infrastructure? I mean, that doesn't occur.
It's about a 3-month timeline, 4-month timeline.
And are you envisioning that you can, that the contractors are going to be willing to wait to be paid anything?
I need to have that conversation, but I believe that would be the case because previous history with this contractor, they've developed an entire subdivision on their own accord for us and didn't bill us until they were completed. That was their own billing structure, not ours. We didn't even ask for it.
So,
and there will be some private money spent up front, right? As this land clearing. I don't think the land clearing falls entirely on private or public domain for putting in sewer and water. There's going to be a portion of our funds that are going to come with this first for that contractor as well.
Yeah, if it's a private road, and it's always going to be a private road, I don't see a way that we can participate in constructing the private road.
Agreed.
But the water and the sewer, and having said that, I hasten to add that we're going to need public easements.
Correct.
To gain access when the sewer leaks or plugs up or whatever, the portion that's public, just like we would not be responsible for anything past that boundary lot where the stub ends and goes to the laterals. But at the public part that we eventually own, we're going to have easements for it so that we can get in there and dig it up when we need to and make the repairs.
Yep. And all those easements would be, they're intended to be set up as part of that developer agreement and final PUD. So those easements start before construction even happens.
having been through this a couple of times now, specifically with, I'm gonna say this team, and that it recently happened in this township, I would also assume that we would need those easements approved and recorded before final payment. Would that be correct?
Not only would you need the easements prepared and recorded, but typically there's a bill of sale that conveys the ownership to the township. And that's one of the very, frequently in other projects, like Meyer, for example. That's one of the last things that happens.
Yeah.
Could the timeline change? Probably yes.
I think it could be almost first because it's part of that. We still don't have truly a final PUD 100% approved. With this team, we've got the final revision approved, but not through the stamped engineering approved.
Engineering drawings are still pending.
Yep. So, those easements would be created or can be created in tandem with those drawings, and approved and recorded before then.
Yeah, the only risk to that is if you encounter a field issue that
Correct.
requires you to change the
Yep.
alignment, now you have a recorded easement that doesn't match what you built in the
Correct.
field, and then you have to revise it, but hopefully that's not a significant hurdle. I think the real issue here is whether or not this is a tool the township wants to participate in to the benefit of the project. And I'm saying project, not developer, even though the developer ultimately would benefit. It's the arguments that Mitch made, which I'll tell you, if you had heard his first arguments, these are definitely, in my mind, things that sound better to me. Nothing against Mitch. When you go through this whole process, you refine your presentations and all that, but I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm just trying to lay it out to give you as much information as possible.
So what is the township on the hook for? Do we have to make interest payments on the bond then?
There would be interest and principal payments on the bond. The revenue stream that you use for that is what's being argued, and that is primarily TIF funds.
Well, and
theoretically,
as a clarification of that, that's only in the event that we default as the developer, which doesn't really make sense. So we're basically saying, hey, we have these TIF funds to guarantee this. We have our rest of our capital stack, our sales and our company value that would go behind this. And essentially in the event that we default, then you have to consider where are you getting these funds from?
So why would we be first on the default list versus your banks? Would they have the land as collateral or any other funds that you've committed?
They may.
Any assets?
So I think that's part of working through the details, whether this tool works or not, before we have those conversations and see who falls where.
And I guess you'd have to find default too,
Correct.
because
Yep.
Steve wants to jump in.
it
Don?
could be the first month, it could be, a
Yep.
year down the line.
Yep.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand on this thing and I couldn't find the button. So I just,
Yeah, it's fine.
I hope you're all well today. Thank you for inviting me to be on. Maybe I could just
Appreciate you being here.
answer a few principles about this program and then maybe more directly answer the question that was just asked. First of all, this program, Build UP, we would be lending to the eligible unit of government, and in this case, it would be the township and the township only. We are not extending through this program any credit to the developer or any third party. This would be township debt for publicly owned infrastructure. And when we look at the publicly owned infrastructure in this project and or any, it would be any publicly owned infrastructure that served the project. And I can give you an example of where we used this tool in the past and why it might be a little bit different than this program. We financed road, water, infrastructure, and sewer with the city of Crystal Falls to extend a public street and public utilities underneath it and along it to the site edge of a private developer. It did not extend into the property per se, it extended to the site edge. In this case, we have private infrastructure and we have public infrastructure. I had a short conversation with John about this and in a follow-up with my colleague Ann, who I believe is in the room. I was somewhat confused for a couple of those conversations, but I do understand that there will be public infrastructure underneath a private road. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how you work this out at a local level, but the simple answer is that public infrastructure underneath that road, if it remains in public ownership and maintained by the public, we would consider that eligible infrastructure. Now, there may be something out there that would preclude that from your end. I don't know. Private road does not. Any other private expense, parking lots, lane clearing on private property, anything that's not owned and maintained by the township would not be eligible for this. So the lending, we would buy township bonds, and the township would have to pledge a legal credit sufficient to cover the principal and interest of those bonds. We do not look at the developer when we're loaning money to a local unit of government. We would purchase your bonds. It's a 15-year payback period. We could, negotiate the amortization, however it works. But to the extent that you would be pledging a revenue source, whether it's a TIF or some other, taxing mechanism, at the end of the day, there would be an overarching understanding per the law that if there was a shortfall in the revenue from whatever source to pay that bond, or if there was a default, the township still owes the principal and interest of that bond. So I just wanted to get that clear that, we're really not going beyond the township. We really can't. If we were to do a separate agreement with the developer, that would be private finance. It would include a lender, and that's nothing that would involve this conversation. But for the purposes of the public infrastructure, that is how that would work.
We've been asked before to participate, as far as I know, in something like this, and we told them we couldn't. Am I remembering that wrong, or, I mean, that's my craw, is that we're not allowed to do this. I sat in that conference room and argued with the developer. We can't do that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm only gave you the information in the affirmative that you were able to do this. That's how that would look.
There's a significant chicken and egg scenario. We cannot fund things for private development, period. So, I don't know if you're thinking of maybe the Legacy Hills scenario over there. I mean, we've had dozens and dozens of things that have come through over the years that we've been involved with or not been involved with. That one was entirely in public right of way, but nonetheless, the developer was going to build it and did build it. And that's, I mean, time flies, how many, 20 years ago? I don't know. And it's still not connected to anything. It's, you know, it's laying in the public streets. And that was part of the rationale, is we were not going to build that, and we can't use public funds on things we don't own. So here, you know, I'm keeping a completely open mind on the scenario of, well, the developer builds it and we don't pay anything until after we own it and accept it as being properly constructed and meeting criteria. But now I guess I have to think through a little bit how that helps anybody, because there's still going to be, the materials are going to have to be purchased and so forth from some source. And the bond revenue, in my mind, I'm struggling to see how we could legally expend the bond revenue, even if we issue issue bonds, how we can expend that revenue until we obtain ownership of the system. And by the time we obtain ownership of the system, it's already built to perfection.
Especially because we could, by that time, have made payments on something.
Oh, you almost certainly will have made payments.
Depending on how long that takes.
Yes.
So,
And and there's an expense to bonds. You're kind of looking at that expense right now in a completely different scenario. But you don't issue bonds overnight, and I'm not prepared. You'll need to rely on your bond counsel to tell you the timing and so forth and the expense associated with the amount. But that's not something that happens overnight. That's a long involved issue on issuing bonds, to use the same word twice in one sentence. So if there is a default, remember, and I'm picking on this other project that kind of
examples are good. Yeah.
But basically, to this day, I think there are like 2 houses in that subdivision where there's no water. No public water. There's a test well. If for some reason, and these are completely apples and oranges type of projects, but if for some reason this project failed, the township is going to be the bond issuer and is going to be obligated to make the payments on those bonds. Now we have the unique situation where we know, at least in theory, who the bond purchasers are going to be. It's not going to be quite the same as other bonds the township has, but nonetheless, there's a legal obligation to pay principal and interest on those bonds on a regular timeline. And if you don't, the township will then be in default, and it's the township's credit rating. But the next time you want to have a water project or a sewer project that will be in jeopardy for that.
Or the
not.
current water project. we're
Correct.
working on. That concerns me.
And
too.
well, and see, the other thing on that, maybe not so much on that one, because that one is a lot farther ahead on a timeline than this one is. But it's not like you can issue bonds by July, for example.
Well, and he's saying April, May.
Yeah.
To really get going.
Well, and again, I shouldn't say that. Maybe you can pay an extra fee and expedite bond issuance, but bond issuance is not an overnight thing that occurs. There's a timeline there that needs to take place, and it's a fairly detailed and involved timeline.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but also the agreement, which would be the developer agreement between the developer and the township, also would add some assurances to your bond, right? Knowing what you also have, not only your town credit, but also basically having everything that the developer has in this case, the land and all that is pledged to that. I think that also has some level, right?
It does, but we need to know what the priority is. I'm assuming,
Yep.
for example, that the land is already going to be subject to, for lack of a more complicated term, a mortgage on it, construction loan, indebtedness of some type. And I'm also going to assume that in order to get that money to turn dirt and start building units, that the financial institution is going to insist on being higher in priority than the township. Just like there are first mortgages, second mortgages, and seventh mortgages, on down the line. So if there's a default, and nobody hopes there's a default here, everybody's fairly excited about the project, I think. But if there is a default, then those with first and second priority will get paid before those who are in third to seventh priority, and those in anybody after first priority may get paid or they may not get paid, depending on how much money there is and how much, how much the vacant land, if there's no construction and the default is that soon, or how much what's left can be sold for in a fire sale upon foreclosure.
And then assuming that we would have the rights to the assets of the TIF or MISTA funding, if the project failed in 6 months, they wouldn't be there. The state's not going to give us money for a project that doesn't happen. And the TIF part of it, all we'd have would be the taxes due on the 5 acres. So that I can't see that being used as collateral to support.
I think we would have to look at that's assuming it defaults before the 13 units are built, basically. That's basically the risk that you'd be looking at in that case. Because after those 13 units are built, those funds, yes, they're spent, but they're also part of that equity at that point, because they're essentially cash that's been spent on the project. So it'd really be the highest risk with any development project is from here until those first 13 units are built. So that will kind of be, in my mind, the risk that would have to be weighed.
Well, and we took a 1-year project and it was stretched to almost 3. So adhering to a timeline, in my mind, is difficult in this project. So saying that you could break ground and we'd only have to make, 2 or 3 payments before some of this might come to fruition, I can't see that happening. Could be wrong. Go ahead.
Do you have a timeline? Let's say that everything falls into place perfectly and that the road gets cleared and then you start laying sewer and water. Do you have a timeline on when that would be done? just in your head, I don't need.
Yeah, I'll look for the items from Gary. So he's ready to clear land as soon as he has permits. Permits are, let's see, we've got Sev working on some stuff. And he had sent me an email, so I'm gonna see if I can find that. Disconnect from my hotspot.
Well, Mike Mitch is looking for that. I have. Creative way of thinking about this, maybe.
Okay.
The easement for the utilities, you don't own an easement. It's just, I mean, we wouldn't own the easement. The developer or the landlord still own the easement. But what if we got creative and made a little strip of land 4 feet wide that went in around the road and had it deeded back to us? It would be township land. And then we would be able to fund it because it's our land.
And then it would be an easement for the HOA essentially at that point. So it'd be a reverse easement.
Well, for starters, any easement would have to be a lot wider than that, because for excavation purposes, I mean, normally.
As long as
We
it's
never
not
do.
under the foundation or
Yep.
under the road.
Yeah, we
It'd be
never
wherever
do
the easement would
Water
be.
or sewer
right?
easements narrower than 15 feet, and those are exceptionally narrow usually. And then there's the question on, we've got some easements in the township that are, if it's sandy soil, that's 30 feet wide and so forth, because it keeps caving. And when you excavate,
The easement for this property, to my understanding, is the entire width of the road and then some function back from the road as well, is what that easement's supposed to look like at the end of the day.
it'll depend on where the plumbing
Yep,
gets.
exactly.
Because if it gets, normally you don't want your plumbing right down the middle of your roadway, because then all of the pavement has to get dug up when you've got a blockage and it has to be excavated. You usually want it over on one side, and frequently you'll have your water line on one side and the sewer line over on the other side, is how, other developments over the years. So you have to destroy as little pavement as necessary when there's a problem down the road. But our easement is also probably gonna have to be for the whole private road, just so we can
Correct.
drive a truck down there.
Yep.
And the easement itself for the water and the sewer will be like maybe, let's say, 10 feet wide from the center line of wherever the pipe is. And usually we wind up with a little survey that tells us every so many feet, this is where the pipe is for the water and the sewer. So our easement for the water and sewer might or might not coincide with where the roadway is. And we being the township, have a legal interest in just by having an easement that gives us a legal easement and legal rights to that strip of land. We don't own it, but we do have legal rights to use it and to dig it up and to maintain what's underneath it as need be, and to drive over to get there to service any equipment or grinder pumps or anything else that's part of the water or sewer line within those areas.
And obviously we don't have the final engineering, but the engineering that was on that previous PUD, it had it just on each side of the road. So water was on one side, sewer was on one side. And actually with this PUD, because we've allowed smaller front yards for whatever reason, we're working through the final design, but it's actually, in a weird case, it's more advantageous for this PUD to have them closer to the center of the road for the same reason of the sand and the undermining. Do you want to be undermining homes, or do you want to be working on, pavement? It's very weird, but that's essentially where it goes. So it'd pretty much be my understanding of where this easement's going to end up is the whole width of the road and pretty much all the way to the front setback of each of these houses is what this easement would likely look like in this neighborhood.
And in fact, if the water and sewer line are truly at the edge of the road, well, I heard you say that
Yep.
they're gonna be more in the middle, but it has to be X number of feet, and
Correct.
we can fill in the blank
10
on
feet
what
is the
we can
requirement.
solve for X
Yep.
later. I guess algebraically or whatever, but it's gotta be on either side, some number of feet on either side of that pipe.
Correct.
And that might be that it, it takes out their front steps, depending on where it goes, because there has to be so many feet on either
Correct.
side of wherever that sewer or the water line is.
Yep.
Yes, John.
We're getting into a lot of minutia at this point. What you have before you is a request to consider another tool in the developer's toolbox. If you want to consider moving forward, we need to look at all of that minutia and all the finest details to make sure the township is protected. If not, we can move on. That's really what this comes down to. It's a request from the developer for the township to take a risk. The township has to make sure it's protecting itself on the back end. So all those other things would come next. You don't have to make a decision. You can't make a decision today.
And I wouldn't expect that you would have a decision until we go through the minutia. Like, what I would see as a beneficial path forward is, hey, we think that we can use this tool together, but we need to put together what that legal structure looks like and what those, the developer agreement looks like. And then once we have that, we would be at a point where we can make a final decision on it. Because I don't think either of us can make a decision that we'd either be happy with today. With the information we have, there's just not enough detail given. And I'll say, kind of to answer the permitting question, Sevlin says second or third week of March, he expects to have permits ready to go on this project.
So the crux of the matter, Mitch, is you're gonna put it in anyway. It has to be done anyway. You're just looking for a tool to help, basically.
We're looking for a tool to help to ensure we can accelerate this timeline and keep the timeline to the 2 years that we're planning on for this project. And especially ensure the 24 units this year.
And do you have anything you wanna add based on what you've heard?
No, Steve had to jump off to another call, but he said if there's anything else to let me know and we can follow up. I think the only thing, and I know John and Mitch and I talked about this, our pipeline is pretty stacked full right now for projects in Build UP. We need to get the first 15 million that Build UP was awarded committed by September 30 of this year. And there's about, trying to remember the math, 6 million left or something like that. The projects in our pipeline right now consume what's left. Now, some of those may fall out, they may not happen. I know in talking with Steve at a Build UP meeting yesterday, he's kind of looking at March as either you're ready to close or you're not. So I only mention that because there is a timing element here, right? In those funds actually being available. I think it's a number lesser than what was up on the screen.
I think so too.
Because, as you discussed, it's only that public component, but just to kind of keep that in mind, there is a timing issue in terms of the funds getting committed to other projects.
I guess that's what I'd like to see then, is the chronology as best as you can,
Yep.
within limits. The legal side of it, the liability side of it, what, the bonding, when the payments would start, how quickly we need to do this, whatever that map looks like, or calendar rather.
Sure.
And Steve didn't mention that. I thought he might. He did tell me that there is some flexibility with those payments. I don't know if he talked with you about that, John.
He just didn't highlight it.
Yeah.
So you can structure the amortization schedule to be interest only at the front end or lower payments that sort of balloon towards the tail end. So a lot of that could be done and creatively on the front end through the paperwork and all that. The other thing I wanted to mention, I consider this type of funding to be very similar to the direct placement bonds we sold to Incredible Bank to refinance these buildings. That went actually pretty quick. You still have to have your bond counsel and financial advisors to do all that stuff, but we're only looking at one purchaser, so it would be a direct placement. That would be Invest UP or Build UP, whoever the technical name is that.
I texted Steve a little while ago and I said, are they right on how long the bonding process will take? And he said, depends. Township would have to do a series of public notices, hearings, pass resolutions, all state law. Crystal Falls did it pretty quick, but they were all in, he said. So they made it happen pretty.
Wondering if somehow we would get lucky with what we already did. Because I think we mentioned up to 10 million for water and sewer. This was never part of the equation, but it's not defined beyond that in bond language. So that part of the equation might already be addressed. Don't quote me on it. I'd have to talk to Tom and Brody about that kind of thing. And they might come back and say, look, this is going to create a problem for what you already had on the table. So that's the other part of the equation. I wasn't going to initiate that conversation until I got some sort of indication from you. If I got a hard no, we're not going to consider this today, then I don't even need to bother them right now. If the board is willing to see where this goes, on the other hand, and it's going to have to go somewhere by March, and probably quicker, then I can make those calls and have better answers for you.
I think we need more information. Or we definitely say no. I mean,
This project from the very beginning has been outside the box of our normal type of development.
It's like they always say, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy.
Why nobody is.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm in support of giving them as much help as we can, if we can. That's the question, if we can. So,
Well, and at what risk, right?
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, because we're floating a 10 million bond right now for the water treatment plant and infrastructure upgrades, and it's just a matter of how this board feels about going more, you know what I mean? So we got significant risk out there now that we didn't have before. So the timing might not be as good as we would hope, but
Yeah, I don't know if it's an issue or not. I think we won't broach that subject with the expensive people until we know it's worth talking about it.
yeah.
And I think there's other ways, like as we work through these final details to help with that de-risking, because the weird thing about development is like we are still using cash in this development. Well, that cash could potentially be given to the township maybe as collateral to fund these bonds during the high risk period. And that's something that can be developed and help de-risk as well. So I think there's a lot of, like you said, there's not enough information to make a decision, but I think there's a lot of ways that we can make this tool useful.
as long as it doesn't put us in a bad spot with, you know, people we've already said no to over the years.
Yep.
And now it's gonna have to not be the same type of plan, you know. that
Correct.
We've already said we can't,
Yep.
because we don't want a precedent here.
Almost everything about this request is identical to the prior request that was turned down, except this is an attainable housing development versus mixed use commercial with residential. And what was my second thought? The developer isn't asking us to pay for the whole thing and then just own it. The developer is asking us to sell the bonds to install it where we get our money back.
And developers asking to make the payment on the bond.
So it's a little bit more complicated than the prior asks that were outright rejected.
Yeah, cause I was around for the prior ask and the prior developer just wanted us to put everything in the development. And then
So he could develop.
he could develop the property.
Yeah.
And we still have property out there today that we've had developers ask us to run water and sewer to, that we've said no. So,
On the township dime.
on the township.
This would be on the township dime with repayment from.
It'd be like a loan from the township somewhat like.
Yeah, I guess you could.
Sort of.
Kind of.
It's
Using the township to facilitate a loan essentially from Build UP is how I see it. Cause they can only use that tool a certain way.
So I guess we have to figure out what the drop dead date is and what more
Yeah.
information we need before we need to move forward, so.
If you're willing to consider going that way. Otherwise, as you can imagine, that's a lot of work that they probably wouldn't spend time going through if the board's not interested in seeing. what
Yeah, we'll
this
easily
looks
spend
like.
hundreds of hours on making sure that we've got something presentable and flow through, on our side to make this happen or
And you
even
already
get to a
know
decision point.
your attorney. He looks out for your best interest from the legal perspective, make sure you're protected to the extent that you can be. Every project has risk. Are you willing to take on some risk to see this go through and ultimately get that, I guess, investment back? Plus still own it. Which
We're gonna
chicken
own
and the
it.
egg again.
We're gonna own it anyway, so.
We're gonna have chickens and eggs all over the place pretty quick.
Scrambled, consensus?
I'd like more information, but I'm open to considering it for sure.
John?
I concur.
Carl?
Yeah, the only thing I'm concerned about is, like I said, I was around when he told the other folks no, and the thing is I don't. Again, this is different, but like, they wanted us to front the whole money. And then of course, we own it, but then they develop the property. Where this is more of a loan situation for you. We help you get the infrastructure and then you repay us back basically through the bond.
I'm sitting here chuckling to myself because in the end, it's very similar.
It
It's
is.
just you already approved a TIF.
Yeah, and that's the other issue is we kind of bent on a tip for. So that's another thing too, but I'm open to more information. But yeah, the precedent that was set in the past was kind of hard for me to kind of dissuade from because like I said, that was a hard no from us because we're not in the developer business and. I'm not gonna throw the old developers under the bus, but we still have property out there owned by developers that would look at this and say, hey, you're doing it for him, why don't you do it for us? You know what I mean?
Did they have the Build UP tool? Cause that's the other big part of this is the Build UP
No.
tool is a tool that exists now.
Yeah,
And I
they
think
did.
the only bonding tool available versus a public bond that you might have looked at previously.
Yeah, at that time, that was not available, and even now with it available, I don't know if we'd even entertain the one developer way out in the west side of the township. That'd be a far reach for water and sewer, like Roger said. But I'm open to more information and we'll see where it goes, I guess.
Do you have an example? I mean, can you highlight more on that project so I can take a
No,
look
I'm not gonna
too?
say anything about that at this time, but it was basically. They bought the property, the water, as Roger said, the water sewer was put in and basically that's where it stopped.
Oh, yeah, I know which project that is.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't wanna be a precedent setter here because we don't wanna go down that road if we don't have to, but. I just kinda looking at this. As a board member it's all basically we're loaning you money through the bonding and you're repaying us back, so. And it's a tool that wasn't available before that we can use now. And if that helps get the project going and more houses sold quicker, maybe that's good, so.
Yeah. And I still think it's facilitating almost the loan from, I know it is a loan from the township, but it is almost, you're facilitating funds from.
I mean, at the end of the
them.
day, the project goes through, we're not out anything,
Correct.
so that's what I'm looking at as the risk for us.
Yeah.
This would be a far more complicated development agreement than the traditional. So
Absolutely.
there's an added layer that has to be sorted out on the front end that you don't normally talk about. Because we're not this involved in the development once the plan is approved. It's a new way of doing things to accomplish immediate needs of, I guess, the country that's being tackled very specifically here in this area, the UP, through InvestUP. And that 15 million they have, that may be all spoken for. In addition to all the other issues, concerns.
So what would be the difference if it was not Build UP? And I don't want to drag this out, but I'm thinking future, if we're gonna get asked again. It wasn't Build UP, it was a bank. What's the difference?
Are they
The
paying
bank
you back
does
for
the
the
bonds.
infrastructure you put in?
Yeah. So somebody goes to the bank and asks them to bond like we did with Incredible. Somebody could do that too. Right?
Yeah, there is no difference.
Okay.
Our rate's probably lower.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, is it,
It's like 1 to 2% or something. It's very
Okay.
low.
That's a good rate in this market.
Mhm.
I guess see if Linda has any comments from Florida. I'll unmute you, Linda, hold on here. Alright, so
I support going forward and looking at this. I think we have many more tools that we can use than they did when you had the previous ask. And I think I still will say, housing is a huge issue, and the state of Michigan and I hope the federal government are attempting to give us more tools. So housing is a big issue in this country.
okay,
Okay.
I guess we get more information and move forward, I guess, either yes or no.
okay,
Yeah, so I guess if you guys can just get me, not now, but if you can, after the meeting, kind of consolidate your thoughts and give me the list of what you want. I think I've got a good understanding of what you want, but just I can work with John or Lynn just so that I make sure that I cover all of that in the next go round. I think that'd be helpful.
Zero risk. That's what they want.
And similarly on the Build UP side, if there are questions, let me know. I guess I'm not sure what additional information you need from us to make a decision, but. if
well,
there
when
is
something isn't real clear, it's hard to ask
Yeah.
questions too, if you don't understand it well enough.
Well, and if your money is all spoken for, then it's kind of a mute issue, right?
I'm not gonna say it's spoken for, because the projects in the pipeline could go forward and could not go
Okay.
forward. I mean, to some extent, it's a matter of who's ready.
Oh.
Who's ready to go, who's ready to close, yeah. We've
Who's
got
actually
multiple projects waiting on forms from MEDC. We've got other projects that aren't there yet, right? So it's really kind of a mishmash.
We're final engineering and permitting away from shovel ready, which is probably a long ways ahead of other projects that are already in their queue.
And by the time we are to that point, we'll be permitted and shovel ready, more than likely, if not already clearing the trees.
So my first question is the bonding side. We'll check with Brody and find out how that impacts our other project, if it does, if it doesn't. If they have a problem with us doing this from that perspective, because that's been in the pipeline for how many years? 15?
No, and that one has to be done. That one is our number one priority, so.
Yeah. That's my main concern. And the liability part. Anything else you want them to check right now? Otherwise, you can email questions to John. So we don't have any debating online.
Can't do that.
I can tell you, I'm basically one conversation ahead of you on this. the things that you heard today is what I heard over the phone, maybe not to this extent a week ago. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell him hard no without you hearing what was being requested and what tools are available, what the complications of it are. So now we move forward, and I anticipate Mitch and his team are going to have to start scrambling if they want to meet that March deadline. And they're going to need answers from us on our bonding process that was already in the works, whether or not this has an adverse impact on that. Because if it's a significantly adverse impact on what we were already working on, that might be the end of the story.
So probably looking at and we can always call a special meeting, so, for a final decision, but, we have a meeting next week already, and that's probably too short of a time frame. So probably looking at that mid-February point to make a real.
Yeah, that should be fine. We should have a lot more by then. I mean, I'll see what I can pull together by the end of this week, but I think there's enough questions and then how to outline that risk a little bit better.
Yeah, because the residents are gonna say, kind of risk. I mean, if a resident talks to me about this, I'm gonna say, hey, there's less risk, there's low risk. At the end of the day, there's low risk for the township. It's accomplishing more housing, and we're gonna get paid back. So I mean, really, it's
Paid back quicker.
get paid back quicker than we would, yeah.
Because, I mean, the demand is so high yet. I mean, we are in a very low risk market. If this was 1976, be a little trickier, but right now, the houses are gonna sell as fast as you can complete them.
Yeah, especially at the price point. His price points are fairly decent.
That does impact the return on the TIF too.
Right.
The sooner those houses are on the market and occupied, the quicker the tax bills are going out. We collect the money, distribute it to them, or it comes to us, however that gyration ends up working through the developer agreement. If all 48 units were occupied in the first year, which I find probably unrealistic.
That would be the second year. So
Yeah.
27 would be occupied in best case.
But that's a very fast timeline for 48 units.
And that's a significant amount of housing on the market for folks to move into. And that in less than 2 years, you're gonna have 48 units at a decent price point on the market. That's pretty good actually for us in the township for residents.
Attainable.
And attainable, yeah,
Well, at least.
Who can define
14 or
that?
17 of them anyway,
yeah.
not all 48.
Well, I see prices for other units that are more than some of these, so.
At 1,200 square feet for 402,000 as a townhome right next door. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right, I think.
I think we're good. Oh, Roger?
I have very limited information here so far, but what duration of a bond issuance are we talking about?
Up to 15 years.
Up to 15, but I would cap it with the TIF personally. That's gonna be the lowest risk.
That definitely minimizes the risk if the term doesn't extend beyond the TIF.
That's fine, that would probably be one of my conditions too, yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't make sense. I mean, as a developer, I wouldn't want to be responsible for something after the TIF is gone,
Yeah.
Either it just doesn't make sense.
And at 15, your payments probably wouldn't be horrible. Especially at a lower interest rate.
Right. Well, I think we could work with you on amortization schedule and building
Sounds
that
like
out.
it. I mean, that's up to the township. They're really, I mean, my impression, and again, I wasn't around when they did the Crystal Falls deal, but it's between Build UP and the township. Whatever you decide to do with the developer, that's between you, but it's
He
gonna
doesn't
be
care about the development agreement
Yep.
side. It's
not at
what
all.
we want to sell him.
It's a township bond
$1 million
and they're
worth of
expecting you to
bonds.
make payments. End of the day.
Right, and then I feel my job as the developer is to help facilitate that agreement with you guys and make sure it, present something that makes sense for you guys to facilitate with Invest UP.
You have to convince at least 4 of the 7 of our board members in the end.
Yep.
That the risk they're taking is minimal.
And I've recorded this too, and I will put it out on the, you know, on our on the YouTube site, so folks can watch this and perfect.
Okay,
All right, 3:11, I guess.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
thank you.